Hello YouTube, it's GoPronopper, and today I have a video for you on the Agfa Ambi Silette. Before I start, I'm prefacing this with a quick little anecdote. This is like my 8th or ninth attempt to make this video, and I haven't published any of them yet because they don't turn out that good. So I'm just going to go ahead and show you all the features and then talk about my own personal thoughts on the camera. So mine came with the case. It's right here. This is not my favorite case just because the back flap isn't removable at all. It's permanently stuck on there. So I tend to just not use it. Now there are two types of Ambi Silette. These cameras were produced from the 1950s to the 1960s. And there are two distinct types. There's type 1 and type 2. Right here I have a type 2 example, and the way to tell is that this camera has strap lugs on both sides, and it has the updated advanced lever on it. The original advanced lever is exactly the same as this one. Just a different frame counter, of course. The only other main difference is that the bright line selector is arranged a bit differently. On the original it's 35-50-90, and on this one it's 50-35-90. This one is worth a little bit more money just because that advanced lever is a massive improvement. This camera is an interchangeable lens leaf shutter rangefinder that has a synchro comper 500 to 1 second shutter. And this one has what is considered by many to be the best bright line finder on any 35mm rangefinder, which I will talk about in a minute. This thing also has a really interesting bayonet mount, which again, I'll get into in a minute. Starting with features. Mine came with this filter, not even sure what kind of filter it is, just that it's a filter. You can see it there. It's a piece of glass with a metal outside. I just use it as the lens cap. Anyways, it's a push-on filter that goes around here. Right here we have the lens. Now this camera had 4 available lenses, the 50mm 2.8, which you see here, the 35, the 90, and the 135. The 135 being the rarest. Right around the outside here we have our aperture selection dial. And then just above that we have our depth of field scale. And then beyond that, we have our focusing ring, and this particular lens focuses down to about 3 feet or 1 meter. Back here, we have our shutter speed selector ring, and these 2 tabs on the side of the camera facilitate in selecting shutter speed. Just above that, we have our MX sync as well as our self-timer. I don't recommend that you use the self-timer at all. Right here, we have a PC socket for flash. This camera is only a cold shoe. On the bottom, we have our lens release button. And then right here we have a sliding foot that is used to support the camera when using the larger lenses. On the bottom, since we're here, we've got a tripod socket and the rewind button. Up here we can see our slide to release for the bright frame finder cover. And right here we can see our viewfinder, rangefinder, and frame lines. On top of the camera we have our rewind knob and film speed reminder, the frame line selector, cold shoe, advanced lever and non-automatic frame counter, shutter release, which is threaded for a cable release, of course. On the back we have our viewfinder eyepiece, which is very, very big and very bright. Again, I'll talk about that in just a minute. On the back, film door release latch, which you pull down on to open that up. On this side, there's nothing but a strap lug. In terms of features, the camera is pretty well equipped and has just about anything you'd need to make, any sort of picture with a reasonable film speed. Now, the lens mount is one of the most interesting points about this camera. To remove a lens, you press down on the button, rotate the lens just a tiny bit, and it pops off. This is the bayonet mount. Now, the amazing thing about this, and since we're here, I'm going to mention right here is the button that adjusts the rangefinder. You can see the frame lines moving whenever I press it. Anyways, the amazing thing about this bayonet mount is that even though there are red dots, you don't even need to line them up. Let's just say I stick it on like that. You literally just twist it until it drops and clicks into place. That's all it takes to mount the lens to this camera. Now how it works is very interesting because this thing has a mount that I would consider a bayonet version of the Signet 80. When the lens pulls it across here, these 3 metal tabs come out the sides and grip onto that little tiny indent on the base of the lens. When you press the button and rotate the lens back, those tabs drop out of sight and the lens can be lifted away. It's also how you can insert the lens in any position and just twist to lock. All the lenses mount the same way. When it comes to use, there is no light meter. Of course, film loading is very standard. It's the same way you'd load any other 35mm camera, and this thing has the normal rangefinder. Now, something to note about the frame counter on this camera. This one counts down, showing you how many frames you have left. So when you set your 24 exposure roll or whatever, you have to set it to that mark on the 24 area. That green arrow indicates the frame, I guess, but I normally start it at 25 just to be absolutely sure. Now, unfortunately, I'd love to show you the inside of the VF-RF, but in my room it's just impractical because I'll be shining it at the desk. If you will give me a moment, I have a picture of a view of the inside on my phone, and I will go get that right now. This may take me a little bit to find. Just gotta figure out where it's at. It's after that. I apologize. While I'm here, I'd just like to mention that this is an extraordinary finder, and it is just so cool to use. The frame line selector is very easy to manipulate, and the frame lines are super bright and really clear. The parallax correction works very well, and it doesn't include a frame line for the 135, but you can just either get the auxiliary finder or use the inner 2/3 of the 90 frame line. Here it is. Again, not really an optimal picture, but you can see kind of what the basic interface looks like. And this doesn't really convey just how clear it is because the lens on my phone is pretty dirty right now. I can only assure you that in real life these are super bright and super clear, not to mention extremely comfortable to use. So those are really the main features of the Ambi Silette. Otherwise, operation is pretty standard for a 35mm rangefinder. Just make your settings around here and fire in the hole. There's nothing really out of the ordinary about using this camera, except for that unusual bayonet mount. Since we're here, I'd also like to give you a nice close-up of that shutter in action. So I'm going to set this to 1/500th of a second, but you really won't be able to see much of anything on that camera. You can't even catch it on camera, it moves so fast. As a matter of fact, you can barely even see it in real life. I'm going to see if shining a flashlight at it helps at all. Well, I've got to have some sort of way to fire the camera. Yeah. Let's try this one more time. You still can't see it. Holy cow. Alright, I guess you'll just have to take my word for it that that speed works. Anyways, here's 1/15th of a second. And yeah, if you're noticing that spot, I accidentally spit a little bit. So I'll be taking care of that off camera. I'll just very gently swab it off with a Q-tip. Don't worry, all will be okay with that one. And I will go all the way down to 1 second. Now be careful because these might be a little bit sluggish. As shown, mine's not perfect. It's a little bit slow towards the end of that cycle, but overall the rest of the speeds are very accurate. Here's 1/30th. And again, this camera can sync at all speeds because it's a leaf shutter. Again, let's show you that awesome bayonet mount just one more time. So now I want to talk about my personal thoughts on this camera. I've been searching for this thing for about 3 years now, and I finally have one. However, I paid way too much for it. I paid $45 for this camera. Granted, under most circumstances that would be considered a really good deal, especially because it is a Type 2, but still, I really don't like paying that amount of money for my cameras. It's just a lot. And if you notice that the wind lever got a little bit sticky there, it's just because I've been using it a lot. It hasn't been an issue before, it's just if I keep firing it repeatedly, it starts to get stuck on the outer swing. But, yeah. So once I finish recording, I'll let it sit for a while and it'll stop doing that. Actually, I think it kind of just stopped doing it. Yeah, there we go. Anyways, I was super excited to show this one to you guys just because it's such an awesome and unique camera. But, again, it's so expensive from my perspective. And sure, some would consider that a very fair price, and I don't see an issue with that. It's just that I normally wouldn't want to pay that sort of premium for a camera like this. That said, I'm extremely glad I got it, and eventually the sting of that price will fade, and I'll be left with what is possibly my nicest rangefinder camera. If you come across one of these for less than or around $50, I would definitely snap it up because these are in surprisingly high demand for their relatively little-known status. Again, this one is referred to as the poor man's Leica because of that excellent viewfinder. And just in general, it's an amazing camera. And if you can find the lenses, even more amazing because they are pretty hard to find here in the US. So anyways, I'm pretty sure that covers just about everything. I want to thank you guys for watching. Please rate, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you guys next time.